Welcome to dentReviews. Tonight I want to do a review of a new earphone that I just got a hold of from Etymotic and Drop. This is called the Drop Plus Etymotic ERX. Clever name. This is an interesting earphone. If you know me and you know my channel, you'll know that I'm a very staunch fan of the Etymotic series of earphones. I love the ER4XR and especially the original ER4S and even the ER2XR. Those three in particular are my favorite Etymotics of all time. They're phenomenal earphones in their neutrality, in their sound signature, in their studio monitor-esque tone. While I would say that they're not perfect, they're by far one of the best in many ways, and they have superb isolation, and the deep fit gives a lot of fit consistency, so you can maintain a good sound frequency response with your resonant peaks and things like that. Long story short, I love Etymotics. So I was a little bit hesitant to give this a chance, honestly, because all it seemed to be was the ER4XR thrown in a more expensive shell, a newer shell, that's bigger and heavier and not as linear of a treble response. So for me personally, that just didn't really make me want to hear it, honestly. I'm not going to lie. However, I was given the chance by Drop to check it out, so I thought, why not? Let me try it. So they sent me this, and I've been listening to it for about a week or two, and I have to say that I've been pleasantly surprised in a few ways. So let me start by giving you an overview of the design, kind of what it looks like, how it's designed. As I said, it's a mix between the Evo shell and the ER4XR driver. The Evo shell on this, I believe it's identical to the Evo shell in its design. It's just darker, it's like a dark gray or black style. It's stainless steel, has the same shape as the Evo shell, and it's very comfortable, kind of semi-molded ear shape. It's got the identical barrels of the ER4 series and all those kind of barrel-shaped Etymotics. The only difference is that it terminates into this new housing instead of the small barrel. The cable is a little bit different as well, for good and bad. It's a T2 connector, the S-Tron T2 connector. Unlike the MMCX or even the old Etymotic 2-pin, this is a very uncommon connector from what I've seen, and I think that a lot of people in the different comment sections on forums and whatnot have basically voiced the opinion that they would have much rather had an MMCX connector. I mean, the main difference is going to be that that's a more standard cable, there's a lot more third-party options, and it's just, you know, a more available cable at different price ranges. You're kind of limited, for now at least, to Etymotic's cable, and their cables are not exactly cheap. How do they hold up? How are they designed? Well, time will tell. I think they're okay. I haven't had any of my Etymotic cables fail, of any of the Etymotic series I've had, and I've used them for years extensively. It has a nice guided ear mold, so it goes around your ear with some springiness. The whole cable is sort of a single sheath design, and it has a small cord lock in the center there, and the small Y-split. This particular one has no markings, and then the single sheath again at the bottom, down to your right angle connector. This shares a similar design to most of the Etymotic right angle connectors, especially the newer models. It's got a decent strain relief, a nice small barrel, so it's pretty compatible with most phone cases and whatnot. It's very sleek and fairly deep. So it's a decent cable. I personally like the compactness of it, so if you wind this up, it's a very compact cable like most of the new Etymotics. The one thing I don't like is it has a tendency to spring. It's not the worst I've felt, but it does have a tendency to want to spring out of its wound shape, and that also goes to when you're just listening to it and you have it on your desk or whatever. It has, you know, sort of a position it wants to jump to. And I'm not a huge fan of that type of cable. I like a cable that's more supple and soft and just kind of falls as it lies. My favorite personal cable is the Prisma Audio Azul cable. That cable is phenomenal. So that's the basic design. The ear tips are an assortment of biflange, triflange, and a new style ear tip. And the new style ear tip comes with three sizes, and this is a single flange sort of cylindrical barrel design. It reminds me a lot of the Sure Star tips. I think that's the right tip I'm thinking of. It's very soft, it's very smooth, and personally for me, I actually find that this is probably the most comfortable ear tip Etymotic has ever made. Especially with this new housing design, I find this probably the most approachable Etymotic that they've made so far. Uh-oh, I hear a cat. Kitty! Sorry about that, my cat decided she wanted to be on the video and then decided no she didn't. Anyway, as I was saying, the new ear tips are very comfortable. I find them an excellent addition to the ear tip lineup for Etymotics. Unfortunately, this model does not come with the standard foam tips, which I am a huge fan of the mid-size gray foam tips. Those are one of my favorite. But it's a nice addition to have these, and you do get a few sizes and still get the triple and biflange. So it's a decent assortment. It also comes with this drop case. Now, what I do like about this case, this is probably my favorite Etymotic case to date as well. The Etymotics generally either come with a soft pouch, a small soft pouch, which isn't very protective, or they have sometimes a larger case that has this sort of semi-molded structure with pockets and things, which is great for storage, but not great for transporting. This is a great middle ground. This fits in your pocket pretty well and fits in a bag very easily. It has a nice semi-rigid shape, and it has a small elastic pocket inside that is actually easily, it fits the ear tips in a little bag, all the ear tips, as well as the filters and removal tool as a spare set of filters, and the earphone with no problem. And as I was just saying, it does come with a spare filter set of green filters and the filter removal tool as well. So it's kind of a somewhat sparse accessory package, I guess you could say, but the accessories are good. I do like that case a lot, and I love the new tips. So I'll stop there with the design features, and jump into the sound quality, because for me personally, you know, that is what matters the most. So, how do these things sound? Well, as I said, these share a lot in common with the ER4XR. However, they are tuned with a slightly more subdued mid-treble response. If you look at my site, dentReviews, and you pull up my graphing tool, you can actually go to the Dent Review target and pull that up first. It's in the middle of the page on the right side. And then you can pull up the Etymotic ERX as well as the Etymotic ER4X if you want to just to compare real quick. I probably would say to use the ERX with the long tips in there, and then the ER4XR with the small tri-tips. Those are my two kind of reference Etymotic measurements, if you will, because I tried to get the resonant peaks under control. It's a little bit hard with some of these measuring rigs, but they're close enough. You can kind of go through all the tips and you can see that resonance kind of shifting around, so just be aware of that. The measurements are going to be pretty consistent, but everything past like 10 kilohertz, sort of up and down, and it's going to have that resonance peak shifting around. So just kind of be aware of that, and don't think, oh, that has a peak at 10 kilohertz. No, it's probably just the resonance was a little bit lower because of the depth of the ear tip or whatever. And that's why I did a lot of different tip measurements, and you can kind of compare them. But if you pull all those up, you'll see that the ER4XR and the ERX have identical bass, identical mids, and identical lower treble up to about 3 kilohertz roughly. So it's essentially the same frequency response in terms of its balance up to that point. However, above that, from between 3 kilohertz and about 10 kilohertz, you'll see that the ERX is a little bit more subdued. Now, when I first saw the graph and I heard about this model, my honest opinion was, that just sounds like a crippled ER4XR. Why would I want a crippled ER4XR? The ER4XR treble is one of the best trebles there is in an earphone, and I was a little bit hesitant to think it could sound good. But when I put them in and I listened to them, my first surprise was that they didn't sound anywhere near as muffled or soft as I expected them to. In fact, they sounded a lot like an ER4XR that had just a little bit more of a relaxed feel to it. And that actually shocked me. I thought it was going to be a little bit more drastic. Now, it is more subdued than the ER4XR. Don't get me wrong, there is a little bit less treble presence. But what's great is that they reduced the treble of the ER4XR in a very gradual and wide band. So if you look at that between 3 kilohertz and 10 kilohertz, there's no strong dip or peak or bumpiness. It's just a gradual slope and a dip over that wide range. So it's smooth. And what that does is it allows that treble response to still be very revealing and very open, but just at a more relaxed level. A little bit softer, a little bit more relaxed. Now, the upper treble past 10 kilohertz isn't vastly different, so you still get a sense of that high, crisp precision and just a slightly more relaxed mid-treble. And that creates almost a heightened sense of high treble precision in a way. It's hard to compare because I feel like the ER4XR has a very high precision sound to it, but it's just a slightly different shape. I'd almost say the treble response of the ERX is V-shaped or U-shaped. Not the whole response, but just the treble. It went from having a from 3 kilohertz to 10 kilohertz having a smooth treble response to having sort of a dip, which kind of gives it that V shape, which is a little bit brighter upper treble and a little bit brighter lower treble, but the mids are softer. Now that's just relatively speaking. Compared to most earphones, it's still very linear, very etymotic. You're not going to hear a drastic difference. It doesn't sound like a completely different earphone. It really does sound like a more relaxed ER4XR. And as I started to compare the ER4XR, I thought, you know what? I still prefer the ER4XR. The treble's a little bit cooler and forward sounding. It has a little bit more like ambient quality to it, which I like. Other than that, though, there's really not a huge difference between the treble. However, when I started to listen to them on their own, like I was laying in bed one night and I just relaxed and listened to a bunch of music, and then I was on the computer at night playing games and just listening to music while I played games, whatever. As I started to not compare them directly, I found a really interesting occurrence, and that is that extra relaxation in the treble almost brought out a little bit of a heightened sense of being able to pick things out because it was just easy to listen to. If you're familiar with the HD600 headphone by Sennheiser, it's kind of like going to the HD650. Now, I actually prefer the HD600, and I still probably prefer the ER4XR, but in the same vein, the HD650 has a loyal following because it's a little bit warmer and a little bit more relaxed, but still very smooth and linear. And what a lot of people find is that relaxed sound allows them to listen to any music that might sometimes kind of just push that treble edge a little bit and make it almost a little bit too forward. Well, it relaxes that and makes it easier to listen to, while still being linear enough that you can pull out all the details and all the nuances. So the forward treble for some people is almost harder to listen to, and the more relaxed treble allows them to ease into the sound and hear all the nuances. I'd say that's a very apt comparison. This allows you to ease into the ER4XR kind of sound and really pull out all the different nuances and treble details. It just, for some people like me, sometimes I feel like I want a little bit more treble energy or maybe a little bit more treble forwardness. But it's a toss-up. I see the appeal of both sides of it, and I think that honestly, surprisingly against what I expected, this Etymotic is a very nice entry into the ER4 series, if you want to call it that. I don't know if it's officially an ER4 earphone, but the ERX line or model is a very nice entry into the Etymotic series because I think that first and foremost, it's competent and it holds up with all the other ER4 series. And secondly, I think that anyone that's approaching Etymotic as a new listener for the first time, it's kind of a hard earphone to get into for some people because you have the challenge of the fit. It's a deep fitting earphone that a lot of people just frankly find uncomfortable. And then you have the sound, which is a little bit more of a lean neutrality, and a lot of people find that it lacks bass and that it might be a little bit forward in the treble. It's kind of hard to listen to for some people, not everybody. Now, I know a lot of people that give that fit time and even get the signature a little bit of time. Generally, they'll kind of warm up to the sound, pun intended, and they get more comfortable with it and they start to love it. And a lot of the most avid Etymotic fans will tell you that at first they may not have really thought it was this great, and they kind of eased into it and then it became one of their favorites. Like me, that's kind of what happened. I almost wrote off Etymotic after listening to the HF5, and I loved the sound of the treble. I thought it sounded thin, but the treble had a good quality to it, but the comfort just almost turned me off. But I stuck with it. I tried a bunch of different things, and ultimately I tried the ER4S later on and was hooked for life. So this is a very approachable Etymotic with a very high quality sound, just albeit a little bit more relaxed. Now, there is a slight difference between the ER4XR and the ERX in terms of technical performance, and I'm frankly finding a very hard, it's a challenge for me to describe this, and it shares a similar characteristic to the Evo, and that is that this new shell, and this could be placebo, it could be my imagination, I don't know, maybe it's just a response, like frequency response thing, but the Evo and the ERX to me both share a heightened sense of spaciousness. And I don't mean that they sound more like a real space necessarily, but that the space between instruments in width and depth seems like it's slightly more improved than the barrel-shaped Etymotics. Again, that could just be the frequency response lending itself to a heightened sense of upper treble precision. It could be the Evo having a nice bass and treble response. I don't know. But I do feel like those two seem to have that slightly heightened sense of imaging. And ironically, those two share the same shell. So I'm not sure if there's any quality to that shell design that improves spaciousness and that kind of technical performance. But I'm very impressed with the technical performance of these. It shares a very Etymotic ER4X quality with a little bit more relaxed sound, and yet I almost think they have a slightly more technical spaciousness to them. With further listening, maybe I'll get used to it and I'll say, oh no, there's nothing to that. But up front, that is something that kind of struck me. It's very small, very minor, but I feel like it's there. So, does that mean they're better than the ER4XR? I would say no. I think that's still probably a better frequency response for my taste personally. I think it is a little bit more linear in a sense. However, I do really appreciate the relaxed treble quality of the ERX, and I am actually starting to like it the more I listen to it. And I decided, what I've done with the ER2XR, let me throw the brown filters in these things. Now the brown filters bump up the frequency response just a little bit at about 3 kilohertz and 6 kilohertz, just a little bit here and there. And what I've found is that actually improves it. So I haven't given it a lot of time, and I will probably report back after I listen to it more. But so far, the ERX with the brown filters is even better than with the stock green filters for me personally. I don't feel like it takes any of the treble past its neutral target. If you look at my target and you kind of look where it falls, it just kind of brings it up and kind of closer to that target while still being a little bit relaxed in some spots. So for me personally, I think the brown filters actually make it a little bit more accurate. So that's kind of the sound signature. It's very ER4X-like, a little bit more relaxed, very technically competent. One thing I like about the new shell is it has stability in the ear. I am a fan of the barrel style Etymotics because they are just light, small, compact. I love that. And they fit nice and deep and they're just disappear in your ear. However, they can be torqued if you pull the cable or push on them or whatever, and that can be uncomfortable. This new shell design molds your ear a little bit, and I do feel like there's more stability there. So I feel like it doesn't hurt as much when you move it around. And it is also a little bit easier to insert because of the mass that you can hold on to and just put in there, especially with those new tips. Now that's going to be a subjective thing. Maybe you find that grabbing the barrel and rotating it or whatever, maybe you have a different insertion experience than I do. But the new design for me is very easy to insert with those new tips. They're very comfortable. They actually have a lot less kind of pressure in the ear. The sound is more relaxed. The frequency response is still linear. So it's just a very comfortable, relaxing, and enjoyable Etymotic experience. I wouldn't think that if you have the Etymotic ER4 series that you have to jump out and buy this because it's superior. In fact, if you have any of the ER series earphones, you're probably not really missing anything unless you know that you want a more relaxed treble, a more easy to listen to Etymotic. This might be the thing for you. For people who aren't in the Etymotic ecosystem, I would highly recommend this as an entry point into the higher end ER series. Now you can get the ER4 and the ER2XR, which is superb, for a lot cheaper than these. However, if you want to get something with this shell design, with the nice tips, with the more relaxed sound, and the kind of the ER4 status of quality, this is an excellent entry point in that regard. Unfortunately, it comes in at around $300 new. If you pre-order it now through Drop, it's $250. If Etymotic is listening to this, I highly recommend you try to get these down to about $200. I think that the value at $200 would be excellent. It's not that it's a bad value, but there's a lot of really steep competition nowadays in the IEM sector. Even in Etymotic's own line, there's a lot of inexpensive models that are superb. And the things that this model might give someone who knows what they're looking for and wants those few characteristics, it's a large price jump. So I think that somewhere closer to the $200 range would be a much better value, but they're still worth the price in my opinion. There's much more expensive earphones that are much worse. These are an excellent Etymotic model to add to their lineup. So I like them a lot more than I expected to, and I hope that's giving you an idea of what they sound like, how they're designed, etc., etc. So check out the graphs, and I do say that if you like this video, please subscribe, share it, like the video. Help me get a following going here so that I can hopefully fund some of these videos and put more effort into them. I really want to do this a lot more and bring you guys more content, and I'm just, juggling this between my normal full-time job and after hours. So anything that you do will help. I appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll try to get back to you. And as always, thank you for watching.